All right, well, welcome everyone. A special welcome to our block producers who have volunteered to be the oracles. So EOS Detroit and EOS USA. Welcome, guys. So the purpose of the call here is to kind of review the kind of where we are with wrapping. I know we've been talking about it for a long time and it's been in development for a long time, but I think we're finally getting to the point where it's the Oracle software is almost ready and or presumably it's completely ready. Eric can give us an update on that. I've been testing this. I know it's running on DevNet right now. So I think the next step here would be to get you guys involved in trying to set it up and run it and kind of get familiar with it and get ready for actually deploying it to mainnet. So I was thinking maybe it might be a good idea just to kind of do a quick overview of what it is and kind of what are the expectations for the oracles. I think we've had, I know Michael, you've been on a call before, but it's probably been a while, so it might be a good idea to review and for others as well. So let me share my screen and just kind of give you a high level. So we're basically doing two types of wrapping in general. So kind of how this project started is the foundation sponsored a project to say, hey, it would be nice if we can have FIO tokens on Ethereum, on the ERC20. And it would also be nice if FIO domains, which are NFTs, are actually portable and can be moved to Ethereum initially. And I'll talk about that in a second because it's actually not Ethereum, it's going to be Polygon, but so that they can be traded on OpenSea, right? So those are kind of the initial objective that the foundation wanted to find a way to sponsor a project to get this done. So that kind of led us down this long path of trying to figure out exactly how do we get this done, and does the foundation want to be a centralized entity and just basically say, hey, we're going to actually be the oracles, and coincidentally, all bridging or wrapping solutions out there actually are centralized, where it's a single entity that basically sits out there and takes custody on one chain and then mints on the other chain and vice versa, right? So, but the foundation was adamant that it doesn't want to be that intermediary. So we kind of came up with this idea for a decentralized solution where we will be able to wrap FIO tokens and FIO domains in a way where there is not a central entity that's actually custodying the assets. So at a high level, the way this works is we built a bunch of contracts on the FIO chain and on the Ethereum and the Polygon chains that are basically connected through an oracle, if you will. And the way this works is, so here's an example of Alice wanting to wrap FIO NFT. And what she would do is she would basically send the FIO domain to a wrapping contract on FIO chain. So there is a FIO.oracle contract that's been deployed, and it has the ability to wrap a domain. And basically what it does is just transfers it to that special contract. That contract is holding that domain, so nobody else can do anything with it. Now, what is happening, the oracles monitor the FIO chain. They identify a transaction and say, oh, somebody's trying to mint a FIO domain NFT. So they pick this up and then they actually talk to Polygon. It's supposed to be Ethereum initially, but we actually changed that to Polygon primarily to gas fees. The domain costs about $40, and it may easily have been $150 to wrap it on Ethereum. So it's like, that doesn't make sense. So, and the primary objective was to support it on OpenSea, and OpenSea now supports Polygon. So that's why we kind of decided that we're actually going to mint it on the Polygon chain instead of Ethereum for the domains. The FIO tokens are still going to be minted to Ethereum mainnet. So basically, the way this works is the contract is expecting, more than one oracle to basically confirm the observation, and so that's happening directly on the chain. The contract, the oracle, first oracle says, "Hey, somebody's trying to mint a domain," so it calls a contract on Ethereum, says that this is what it's seen, and then another oracle does that, and then the third oracle does that. By that time, the contract says, okay, well, I now have enough observations recorded so that I can actually mint that ERC 721 and send it to whatever address on the Ethereum or Polygon side Alice has specified. So that's kind of how this works. The idea is that each oracle basically runs this piece of software that monitors the other chain, right? So it monitors, in this case, FIO chain, and once it observes that something is happening, then it goes and records that on the Ethereum chain. And so each oracle instance, if you will, kind of runs totally independent. It doesn't care who else is out there doing what. It just says, I've seen it, and I'm recording the fact that it happened, right? And the contracts are built in such a way that once enough oracles made the observation, then the action actually happens. And in the reverse, it will happen the same way, right? It's just swap the FIO chain for Polygon and the Ethereum chain for FIO, right? And it's basically that same concept. If Alice wants to unwrap the domain, she will send it to a Polygon contract, execute an action on the Polygon contract. The oracle is going to be observing the Polygon contract, says, oh, somebody's trying to unwrap the domain, and then they're going to go and execute an action on the FIO chain. And once we have 3 oracles that have done that, then that domain gets transferred to whatever was the address that was specified. And it works the same way for FIO tokens, right? So conceptually, it's the same thing. It's you're basically monitoring one chain and recording the observation on the other chain. Does that make sense? Any questions on that?
Yeah, so we're essentially monitoring, kind of plugged into like 2 WebSockets. We're operating, paying attention to wrapping and unwrapping. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, from a technical standpoint, I don't know, Eric or Adam, if you want to comment on kind of how exactly that monitoring is done.
Yeah, there's a document we could point you to on that on the FIO chain. It's monitoring an account. So we do have that Oracle code out there too, and could look at that. On the ERC side, it's monitoring events. Specifically, but yeah, that's the basics.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so maybe I'll just wanted to review this. Then next, I kind of want to review the wrapping kind of manual real quick here, and then maybe hopefully you have some time left, and Eric, you can kind of walk through where it's running, how it's running, and then kind of points to any repos or any documents that might have all the information, so everybody can start looking at it. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Okay.
I can post those out.
Cool.
Yep.
Well, let me actually post a link to this here so everybody can read through that at their leisure. And here's what we created. I kind of call this operations manual. So it basically says, hey, here's what we are expecting from Oracle and custodians. So there's kind of 2 concepts. One is the Oracle, which is the entity that is actually monitoring the chains, as we just discussed. But there's also a higher level entity, which is called custodian. And the goal here is that the custodians are basically block producers, all the block producers. And on the FIO chain, that's exactly what it is, because obviously as it changes, it's very easy to know who the block producer is. On the Ethereum side, it's a little harder because anytime there is a change in block producers, in theory, that should be same change should be made on the Ethereum side. But I'll kind of skip the custodian portion from this meeting because I do want to kind of cover that with all the BPs once we get closer to it. But basically, the custodians are responsible for appointing oracles, right? So once you have oracles running, then an oracle says, well, I don't want to be an oracle anymore, and somebody else wants to be an oracle, then the custodians would actually execute the actions on both the FIO chain and the other chain, Ethereum or Polygon, basically deregistering one oracle and registering another. So that's the primary responsibility of the custodians. And then obviously if some shit hits the fan, they might get involved as well. In terms of oracles, so this is kind of talks about responsibilities for FIO token wrapping. So let's talk about that. So oracles obviously be responsible for monitoring the FIO chain for the wrap transaction, and then monitoring Ethereum chain for unwrapped transactions. We'll also be responsible for setting fees on the FIO chain, and I'll come back to the fees here in a second. I think that's obviously important for oracles. And obviously ensuring your Ethereum private key. And anytime it says Ethereum, just think Ethereum and Polygon, because obviously those are going to be the two ones that are being used. So ensuring your key is secure, obviously, ensuring your thing is running, the Oracle is actually running. And then also potentially involve resolve any issues that can arise, right? So because this is all brand new, in theory, it should run automatically. Once we set it up, it should just run, and in an ideal world, it doesn't really need much oversight. But in practice, we do anticipate that there might be some issues where we may want the oracles to basically try to figure out, okay, what is going on? Why did this not work? And so we kind of list some of the potential issues here and possible mitigations of those issues. I'm gonna not cover that in this call, since I'm not sure we're gonna have enough time, so I'm just gonna post this in here.
I
So
do
you guys
have
could,
two questions
yeah?
that you may not have to answer right now because for time reason, but number one is, is there a way to monitor that the Oracle service is running properly? Like a lot of price oracles, we just check and make sure that, data has been submitted recently. But when you're dealing with just job Oracle, if it's more than 5-10 minutes between a transfer, is there any way to monitor that it's running, or will we just know, whoops, we're getting too many queued up, backlogged wraps? And then secondly, if there's only 3 of us, what if one of us is offline? What does that do? And is there a penalty? Can I run 2?
Yeah, all great questions. So actually there is a monitor, and Eric, maybe once you start talking about the infrastructure and the technical side, you can talk about that monitor as well. But
Perfect.
there is,
that may be where it is.
yeah,
Sorry,
that
popped
is,
into my head.
no, that's good. There is kind of this what the foundation is also building is kind of this page that lets you kind of see, like, okay, here's all the wraps that are being recorded, here's all the unwraps that are being recorded, and kind of monitoring if every oracle has actually acted on it, right? Because it's very easy to say, okay, I can see a user send tokens to a wrap contract on FIO, and now I'm expecting that 3 oracles execute something on the Ethereum side, right? And if they don't, or one of them didn't, right, then obviously there's a problem, and we now probably need to go and talk to that one that didn't, right, and see what's going on.
So they'll kind of be, I don't want to say not the burden on the foundation, but there will be a system that A, is showing that information, and B, may at least be able to alert somebody. I mean, it doesn't have to automatically text message me, but to know that there might be an issue somewhere. That's just dealing with all the other Oracle softwares and one-offs. That how do we know?
yeah, that's and we'll talk about monitoring. I don't think we have much.
Pablo, there is no monitor. We explicitly don't have a monitor for this one. We have a UI that will show all the statuses, and it's passive, but that's just in the admin
Oop.
UX. There's no monitor that sends out
Right.
messages.
So I just wanted to clarify that. So, but to me, that is a monitor, right? It's basically a page, and
Is-
that page is going to be public, right? Because for transparency, we want anybody to know, like, hey, here's what's happening. Like, here's all the wrapping transactions. So
Absolutely.
you
But if
know
no,
that you
is
know.
anybody paying attention to that page, or is it going to
Yeah.
be all of us getting lit up in the
Well,
FIO channel that, hey, the wraps aren't working? Ah, shit, you're right.
Yeah, I think so. So we talked about the notification part of it, and we descoped it from MVP. So I think it's still something we want to build, but it's not currently
Cool.
going to be part of the MVP. So I think initially it is going to be exactly what you just said. Is just let's make sure that we take a look at this page, and let's make sure that it doesn't show any errors. And if it does, then yes, we will
Yeah,
probably be lit
nope,
up. And
you
and
answered. I think you said exactly. Is that, yeah, short term look? Yeah, no, we've got a page that may show it, and at least can see it without really having to look too hard. But eventually, yeah, we'll add in, and
Yeah.
just throw that into the feature list. So that's
Yep.
cool. Just wanted to
yeah,
ask. And
that's
check.
that's kind of the short-term plan. So yeah, and then the plan is to use the Telegram channel, and just anytime anybody sees any issues, then really try to troubleshoot it, and also potentially, I think, also try to find like underlying issues, right? Which is probably another reason where you actually want to just kind of be involved, especially early on, and say, okay, well, why didn't this work? Is there a bug somewhere? Should we fix something, or whatever the case might be? So anyway, this is the manual. I'll encourage you to give it a read. I will also post, there's a kind of a similar one on the token. I'm sorry, that was token. This is domain wrapping. So those are kind of the two operation manuals that kind of talk about their responsibilities. They're very much similar. They're overlapped to a large extent, but there are some differences, and it kind of talks about, well, what happens if, what we would expect is that the end user, right, is going to basically somehow reach out and say, hey, I've just, tried to wrap 10,000 FIO, and I send it to the wrapping contract, but I don't see it a WFIO on the other side, right? What's going on? And now, there's kind of potentially quote unquote issues that we need to somehow account for. Like there's a $10,000 in this wrapping contract. We either need to wrap in a WFIO and give it to the user, or we need to refund the FIO to the user. Now, of course, that assumes there is a bug, right? There was some problem where it didn't automatically work. So ideally, there aren't going to be many of those, but there can be, right? So we kind of got to be prepared for that. Let me talk a little bit briefly about the fee construct, because I think that's obviously important. So first of all, and this is something we should probably talk about here. The foundation is obviously prepared to compensate you guys upfront costs. And no gas fees are crazy on Ethereum, especially. So definitely any kind of startup costs for deploying any of those contracts, we will, the foundation is probably, I'm going to propose to the foundation that each one of you just provides a public key on the Ethereum Polygon, and the foundation just gives you some tokens so that you can initially execute those contracts. We can submit that proposal to the foundation. But then going forward, the idea is that, once we kind of figure out what's the volume, how many transactions are running, and what does it cost, and what's the level of effort, all of those things, there is a fee setting mechanism. Anytime you want to wrap tokens or wrap FIO domains, you basically, when you send that action to the FIO chain, you have to pay a fee in FIO. And what that fee is set by the oracles, and it is intended to basically cover all your costs across wrapping and then unwrapping, because obviously it's hard to collect that fee on the Ethereum sides to go to the oracles. The idea is that we would have charged enough in that wrap transaction so that it covers not just the wrap, but then the potential unwrap, right? And this fee initially can be, especially on the token wrapping side, could be higher. We don't anticipate initially that people are going to expect a very low transaction fee on the token wrapping part, which is obviously where the highest cost is, because that's where the Ethereum transactions come into play. So the idea is that you guys submit a fee, and that fee gets recorded, and then the median of that fee is charged, and then it gets divided among the oracles and automatically sent to each oracle when that fee is collected. So kind of that's how it works. Now, obviously, the big question would be what to set this fee to so that it covers enough. And I think it's probably going to be a little bit of a trial and error early on to try to figure this out. All right, so that's kind of my high-level overview in terms of kind of what the functionality is and what the responsibilities are. I think the first step that we kind of got this group together now is, I think we are at a point where we would like you guys to kind of start playing with the Oracle software, maybe install it somewhere, start running it and seeing how it functions, and making sure all of that is working fine. If you have any questions, comments, bug fixes, whatever the case might be. So with that, I'll hand it off to Eric. And Eric, if you can kind of give a quick overview of where we are from a technical standpoint, and what is maybe quick overview of the tech stack, that would be great.
Yeah, I sent out the link to the source code. So we have that software. So it's an Oracle, it's JavaScript. It's running up right now. We have like an infrastructure that Pablo was mentioning where we're testing this on Casey put up a FIO server. So we have those three pieces, right? The FIO side, the ERC20 side, just for token wrapping for now, let's discuss. And then the Oracle middleware, right? So right now we have a test server up there that allows for it's kind of got the version with all the wrapping on there, so you can actually do a wrap on it. And then we have three oracles essentially running on an AWS right now, just as a test. And those have a whole deployment Docker infrastructure around them that I can send out. And then we have obviously the contracts out on the ERC20 side. So we have that so it can be tested. As with some of the FIO functionality, we have the tools to actually do a wrap involve either like running something locally, running a JavaScript, custom JavaScript, having a tool like Anchor Wallet to actually do a wrap on the FIO side, right? And that will then get picked up by the Oracle. But you still have to fill in around that. And we have a document also that explains this testing infrastructure that I can send out as well. I think a lot of this is on the wiki. I may just maybe pull it into a document. Do most of you have access to the wiki if I send out links into like the Atlassian stuff, or have you guys never really gone into that?
I have Atlassian, but every time I go to log in, it doesn't like me, but that's my own fault.
So those pages are not public, Eric?
What's that?
Those pages are not public?
They are, but like I still think a lot of people don't have trouble accessing a lot of our wiki stuff.
Oh yeah, I don't know. I know when y'all would post it in there and be like, "Hey, review this FIP," and I'm like, "All right, cool, bam." Oh, shit, that's right.
Exactly.
Well, but it's if the page is public, you don't even need a login to view it, right?
Maybe I didn't see a skip button, but it prompted me with the login. Anyway, whatever it is. I mean, it's mostly on me. Y'all's tried.
Well, tell me if you can get to that link I just sent out there.
And a lot of times on my laptop, it does work. A lot of times I'm on my phone, and I know the last time I damn, was on my phone. So maybe that has to do with it. But yes, I can see this. So
Okay.
Yeah.
Good then. The actual Docker stuff is not on a public page right now. I had reached out to you, Pavel, to see where we want to put that. It's right now in that ops section. So we'll figure out where to post that and get that to you as well. So there are two pieces. The document I just sent is that to test against that infrastructure I just talked about. As Pavel mentioned, the next step would be to how do we get your oracles into that infrastructure instead of the dummy oracles that I have running on AWS right now. We'll call you guys the smart oracles, not the dummy oracles. And so just kind of give you a little overview. Right now, we use a tool called Cryptonym to kind of, that's a tool that we use to create, to hit a FIO node and create transactions on it. So it just is this tool we have, and you're welcome to use that there as well if it works for you. It doesn't run on PC, much to Pablo's chagrin, but it works on a Mac okay if you want to run and install that. As you see, it just kind of gives you this overview into FIO stuff. Most of you probably will have no problems kind of doing transactions against RAP. We'll have to give you, that's a good point, on the RAP API. There's some, Pavel, we may want to just pull together some information from the FIP instead of just pointing everyone to these huge documents to do a lot of this stuff as well, if they want to create their own Clio transactions or something like that. But I'll work on that as well. So again, in this document, you have those three pieces we talked about, the ERC20, and then the ERC721 and the Polygon are the contracts out there. Again, we're not using the ERC721 Etherscan one, we're using the Polygon contract for wrapping. Has some information on setting up just with, again, most of this, you guys will be very familiar with this. This is just setting up an account on testnet. Right now, I should actually clarify, yeah, all of this stuff hits our testnet as well. Wait, let me think on that. Sorry, it hits Casey's FIO server, and it hits Robston on the ERC20 side for the ERC20.
And just to be clear, what Eric is showing here is not just the Oracle, but kind of like the entire end-to-end process, right? So obviously, in a real environment, the Oracle only sits in between and runs automatically, right? And then the user is going to go to a tool that, by the way, we're going to be building into the dashboard, so it's pretty user friendly, right? And push a few buttons, and it will basically just go and wrap the FIO tokens, which means submit a transaction to the FIO chain, right? And then unwrap, which means submit a transaction to the Ethereum chain. And the Oracle is obviously not involved in any of that. This is just a list, kind of a step-by-step process. If you wanted to do the whole thing, if you actually want to pretend to be the user who wants to wrap FIO onto the FIO chain and then see it as WFIO on the Ethereum chain, then kind of have to go through all these steps because we don't have the user-friendly tools yet.
That's exactly right. Thanks, Pablo. Yeah, and on the, obviously you can use MetaMask on the ERC20 side, but on the FIO side, it's a little tough, and that's where tools like this Cryptonym, or you could probably do it with just a push transaction as well from Clio. As well, which I could put into here is what I was talking about. But yeah, this is, once we deploy it to your servers, this is what we'll need to do to kind of test that infrastructure. The actual deployment piece for this looks something like this, and I will pull it into a file as well. Docker instructions for block producers. So we have this kind of set of instructions. What we have is you'll need to set up a local environment. So all the keys, probably important to note, if you look at the source code, you'll see this as well, are set up in the local.env file. So that's where you'll be holding your Oracle keys. And then there's a Docker compose to actually deploy the software from the latest master on the FIO.oracle repo and deploy it locally. Hope it has not been, we've tested this on our AWS. I'd imagine we may run into some issues here, and I can, open to fixes or changes with all of this as well. And I can pull in our DevOps guy, Kenneth, to help with that. So
not really a Docker shop. Does it have to be in Docker, or can I just pull it and run it local?
you could probably just pull it and run it local with the, you know, the right instructions on that as well. Yeah, for sure. And
I don't like
can
following the
document more of
regular
a
instructions.
manual.
That's how I break things. So, all
What's
right.
that? Yeah.
I don't like following the regular instructions. That's how I break things.
So yeah, and so you could probably get most of that from the Docker. We can just give you some manual instructions as well.
Yeah, I mean that init looks like it. I didn't know if
Yeah.
y'all sometimes, I mean, Docker is obviously easier for a lot of people, and I know everybody kind of loves it, but no, I just spin up a VM for it.
Sure. Yeah. Easy. So those are the pieces. I think next steps are to get this in your hands and try that install or try the manual install. It'll take a little bit more than to kind of loop you as an Oracle into our infrastructure, and then we'll have to register you. So my guess is this will just take some back and forth as we do that. Because Casey, remind me, how are we registering Oracles manually with the custodians now? Do we just kind of call in on both sides of the chain, or Adam, and just register, do manually with our own keys from custodians?
Yeah, at least on the FIO side, when I launched the chain up, basically I register 3 oracles and then set the fees for all 3.
Okay.
Yeah, and then the ERC side, you really just use the custodian keys to register another one.
Okay. So yeah, so
Did I
once,
hear right? This is a third or a different test net. This isn't the real FIO test net.
it is not running. No, right now, this is just because we haven't deployed the FIO stuff to testnet yet, the wrapping contract yet. So we have to run it on a local node here. But we could also give you access to that directory too if you want to run your own node, but that would get a little strange probably. Might be easier just to have us run that kind of central.
Well, we need to connect to the WebSocket, I guess, of that, as long as it's exposed. I mean, I'm fine using, you know, a dedicated, or we can spin one up locally here too. I mean,
well, that's true. I mean, that would
nodes.
give you some, I mean, but I wouldn't know how to network those. You know what I mean?
It's just an EOS chain. I'm pretty familiar with how that works, but we don't have to.
No,
But yeah, I mean,
we'd have to like, it's not a net, right? It just uses our dev tools to spin up a 3-node local server. It's like a test server.
as long as I don't re-provision it, I mean, I could connect to it as a peer and synchronize it and run it local, or as long as you've got WebSockets exposed. And at this phase, we can definitely use that single point. I was just confirming. I was like, oh wait, that's not regular testnet.
No, it's a good point.
The only concern I have with that is that we do reset it every once in a while, and then that coordination could kind of be a little bit weird. But
yeah, it's not. I mean, you could do it, but it's not worth it. If y'all are resetting it, definitely. But yeah, that's perfectly fine. We'll. I assume you've got it publicly exposed. We can just slide onto the WebSocket.
Yeah, reach out.
Yeah,
to
and
me
eventually. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead, Casey.
I was just gonna say, yeah, reach out to me after, and I'll get you set up if you want to play around with it.
Yeah.
Oh well, everybody's going to need it, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
everyone's going to need that. We'll publish
download
that.
this.
We'll put out a little manual for that, I think, is the best thing. And you're right. I think eventually the next step would then be to create a true kind of more network where you guys can run your own nodes, right? And hit those.
Or use testnet. But yeah, I mean, main thing is we'll all, I'm assuming, need access to it. It may be built into the Docker image, but I don't know if it's publicly accessible if it's a private network. Because we're my servers from South Carolina are going to need to tap into that WebSocket, right?
Yeah, no, Casey's server is public. It's open.
Perfect.
Yeah, so those are things we'll have to work out though. Like as we kind of expand this, if you guys can't hit it or something's not working, we'll figure that out.
Yeah, we'll get it going. But I was trying to make sure all my things are crossed. I'll probably use Etherscan it's Etherscan, right? That has the free API for Rompson.
Yes. Yeah. I have a, you mean just to create your own account so you can wrap to some account, or like, what are you talking about?
Well, the WebSocket.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean.
Yeah, that'll be on Robston. Make sure you create your account on Robston to get your keys. And so you can wrap and unwrap. Yep.
Correct. But I mean, like this Docker image. So I mean, if you just spin up the Docker image today, it already has pre-built configurations to read the FIO testnet from Casey's server and Rompson from Etherscan's public IPs or?
Yeah, that'll be in the environment variables. This is, yeah, I mean, I think in here is actually.
Etherscan, there it is. I
Right
see
now. Yeah.
Etherscan API. There
Yeah.
it is.
So,
Perfect.
and we'll have to give you that. I think this doesn't, I think I just X'd out some of it, but we'll give you all the right information for that. Yes.
I have an Etherscan account API
Oh.
key. I mean, so that's why I asked, because I plan on using
Oh.
that. I mean, it's free, but I mean,
Yeah.
I have a key and everything. So that's why I was just curious as to, yeah, we'll use his node and then Etherscan.
Sure.
So
Yeah,
I think
I
the-
see what you're saying.
Go ahead, Adam.
I was saying, I think it's actually on Rinkeby network now. Or did we move it to Robston? I wasn't so sure. Just want to be clear.
Oh,
You know which network it's on, Eric? I was just
I
confused.
thought it's still on Robson. Did I miss that one?
It was on Robson. That's where I was testing it the other day, but I don't know if you guys changed it.
Did that change with the latest?
Okay,
deployment?
no. Maybe it's my latest deployment now. I thought I had it deployed on Rinkeby a few months back.
We could check on that.
Yeah, so anyway, in terms of the kind of the process here, I think the first step is really just kind of get this up and running. You guys set up the oracles, so they were talking to the DevNet that we have set up, and just kind of see if that works, if there are issues, questions, and we obviously still continue testing it and playing with it and making sure that it all works correct. I think the next step after that, correct me if I'm wrong, Eric, would be to deploy it to testnet. And then obviously, do that on testnet. I would probably think that at that point, we will get the BPs involved, and just so we can kind of practice that process of custodians, right? When we deploy it to testnet. And then obviously the last step would be to deploy it to mainnet and actually have it work. And we're, like I mentioned, also building a set of UI tools that are going to be used by the users to wrap and unwrap. So by the time, it's probably, hopefully, I'm not sure exactly what the schedule is, but hopefully around the time that it goes to mainnet, we might have some of those tools, or maybe not, but we'll see. So.
No, I think the dashboard stuff is like, well, it kind of depends since the team's in Ukraine, but that's a 2-week out. So I think we'll be in plenty of time there and be able to test against testnet with that one, Pavo,
Oh,
for sure.
cool. I didn't know. That's okay.
And then the
awesome.
admin UI probably that's shortly after that, right? So we can start monitoring stuff. Yeah. So it'll be there.
Awesome.
Yeah. Good. Yeah, no, those are the steps. It's gonna take a little bit of back and forth with you guys getting this up and running. But we'll figure it out. And we'll just use that Telegram channel, Pavo, is that the main?
Yeah, I then think that's the goal, is let's use that channel for any questions, issues, things like that. So.
Sounds good.
Any questions on how that all works?
I'm curious to see how it's going to handle with all these fees, because there's just so many dynamics, but I mean, it is what it is.
But that is true too. We should probably go through, once you guys get your hands on this, we can go through kind of how the fees are set, because there's this, and we can maybe dig into the code a little bit more too on the gas price. There's a few ways there's a manual pricing, and then otherwise we do a query to get the gas price where you can get low, average, or high, so there are some.
Well, I mean, I guess
there.
my concern, and I mean, it doesn't have to be on this call or whatever, but I mean, and biggest concern always been is, I mean, if it's $100, $120 gas fees, sometimes, right? Sometimes it's $30, $40 or whatever. That means that we're going to err on the side of caution, and we're going to have to charge both ways. Like you said, you can't tag them on the way back. So you bill for it up front. So, I mean, my concern is that it's going to be, oh yeah, you want to go list something over on OpenSea, you're going to end up paying a $250, $300 fee just to make sure. I mean, maybe it barely covers it. Maybe we make out like bandits that transaction. It just fluctuates so wildly.
And that's why, Michael, we are actually doing this on Polygon for domains specifically, right? Because the assumption was that if at a $40, kind of retail value of a domain, nobody's going to pay $250. And remember, it has to be times 3, right? Because each Oracle has the same fee. And
Oh,
the
even
user has
more.
to,
And that's
and
what,
the
like,
user
that's
has to
it. It started
cover.
compounding
Yeah, and the
on the
user
way
has to
back.
cover the fees for all oracles. So basically,
Times 6, because it's,
well,
well, no, I guess it's not times 6. It's only times 3 one way, right?
well, on
Yeah.
the way back, you just have FIO fees, right? Because
Yeah,
you're gonna have
those
to,
are minimal.
which
That's
which
right.
are minimal.
That's right.
So yeah, it's really just kind of that one way on the way back. The user obviously has Ethereum fees in this case, and that's the reason we went with Polygon. And I'm trying to pull up. We actually did a modeling. I just can't find it real quick here, but we did a modeling for how much we think it's gonna cost, and that's where we basically say, no way, this is not going to work for domains. Now for tokens, it's different, right? Because for tokens, it depends on how many tokens you're wrapping, right? If you're wrapping 10 FIO, then yeah, it's not going to make sense for you. But if you're wrapping, 10 million FIO, then you could pay potentially, even $1,000 fee, right? So that's why we kind of felt that for the FIO, those transactions just simply be done on a larger a number of FIO, right? And
I
so
do remember y'all saying is that, look, it's going to be expensive.
yeah,
Don't
yeah,
do it for small amounts.
yeah, exactly. So that's kind of how we're thinking about this, is that it is, the primary objective here is just to kind of move it over to Ethereum. And now, that WFIO can just, be part of the Ethereum ecosystem. You can, for example, go and buy some WFIO on Uniswap, right? And that doesn't really require you to wrap and unwrap. You really only want to unwrap once you're actually want to redeem it for FIO. But
Oh, I get it. I was
but you
just
don't
yesterday
always have
having
to.
to explain, why does everybody have an ERC20 token? I'm like, well, it's what, like, everybody has an IP address these days. I mean, it's just kind of it's how you work in the ecosystem right now. So anyway, all right, perfect. Yeah, I'm down for
But
the
yeah, on
cause.
Polygon, it's going to be super cheap. So I'm trying to find this spreadsheet that I had, but it is really inexpensive on the Polygon side.
Makes sense.
All right, any other questions?
Bob, I don't know if you
Good.
mentioned, but the volume, we don't, you were talking also about, like, Michael, about kind of volume and stuff. I don't think the expectation is the volume will be super high on this to start. So manually monitoring it should be reasonable. And Pablo, I don't know, like, have there been other discussions on kind of what the economic model is for VPs to run these, if the volume isn't huge on going through or anything like that? Or
Yeah, so we kind of talked about we talked about the fact that early on it's going to be a little bit hard, right? That's why I think the foundation, no, I mean, hard to predict exactly what what the income is going to be from this, and
Well,
that's why I think the
obviously,
foundation.
we do get paid to run things for the chain. So like I said, the main thing about the rate, and how obviously there won't be a lot of traffic, was it's really hard to tell if it's working or not. So in theory, you shouldn't have much more cost other than running a simple little node. Obviously, the transactions, if you're not doing a transaction and you're not making any money, you're not spending any money. But when I mentioned, yeah, if the volume is low, is it normal to go 8-12 hours between, or has it just been broken for the last 8? I mean, that was where. So further, I mean, I understand all the economic, and I assume everybody's, we'll figure it out. We've earned some FIO in the meantime, so, and I've got some ETH around, so we're definitely down to kind of figure it out and do whatever. But like I say, the main thing is it, other than just knowing that there's things that are stuck, it's almost going to be impossible at this phase, I'm assuming, to monitor it.
Well,
unless like the agent has like a health status. That's what most people are doing, is building a little, what's the, like, a lot of them will actually do an RPC query to the node, and if it returns back a current block number, current block time, then you know that it's connected to a node that is working properly. Same thing over on E. So you can query your service and say, look, it thinks it's working. Makes sense? Anyway.
Well, I think, once you have this monitor site, set up, you will certainly know once somebody submits a transaction. Now, obviously,
well, I'm
if
not
there's no
watching that. I got a
transaction,
lot of sites that I watch.
no,
It's probably
I
not going to
get
be
it,
that one.
but I will probably be watching it quite frequently,
Correct.
right? And you will definitely find out if your stuff's not working from us. So
yeah, and getting started, that's what I say. Perfectly good. And that
Yeah.
was really down that process. But yeah, like I say, is when you get to MVP 2 or 3 or whatever.
I think eventually we want
run
to
into
have
that a lot
monitors.
where we just don't have a good way of knowing if it's working or not. And sometimes, Etherscan boinks out, or Casey reloaded the server and we didn't know it, different things like that. It's just good to be able to monitor it versus getting screamed at. But we'll get there. I don't mean it's got to be today. Makes sense.
Yeah, and going back to the economic model question, what I was saying is that early on, it's going to be a little bit of experimentation and kind of trying to see what the volumes are, but at the same time, the foundation is definitely willing to compensate all of your transaction costs so that you're not out Ethereum doing all those transactions. So I'm sure we'll make sure we'll find a way to ensure that. And I'm actually going to propose to the foundation that kind of start off by giving you guys some ETH.
I'll send you my Rompstein bill and see if y'all can reimburse that. That cool?
Well, actually, Robson is the hard one because you can't really buy Robson.
That's true. That's actually, it's like jungle tokens. They're the hot commodity. Is that no, they don't really exist anywhere.
It's like I was trying to get Robson tokens the other day. I'm like, I can't get any. None of the faucets are working.
Valid point. Valid point. Well, I'm excited, guys. Like I say, IBC is always a hot spot in EOS USA's mind. So happy to help try to break it and run it.
Awesome. Well, good to have you guys on board. Any other questions? JP, do you have any questions? Luke?
I think I'm good. Do we know, have an idea of when we'll want to get all the BPs together to talk about the custodian side of things?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know, Eric, when do we have the next BP meeting coming up? Or maybe we just we'll probably need to spend some time. I don't know if we set up a separate conversation for just that, or do we just try to tag it to the next BP meeting, which we're probably due for, right?
Well, our next meeting is probably going to be another release party where I have to get the next version out the door. But yeah, no, I should set up a general VP meeting.
Yeah, so maybe.
And I would probably say, just general overview about what is this BP custodian or whatever, so people can read it as needed, and then we can bring it up on a call and discuss it or whatever. But I think it sounds a lot more intense than maybe it is. You know what I mean? So that's what I say is just.
I think that the on the FIO side, it really is nothing else than a MSIG of BPs.
Exactly.
Which is something that already exists, right? So if you want to change oracles on the FIO side, then you basically do kind of MSIG BP MSIG, which is something that's common. Now it gets a little trickier on the Ethereum side, right? Because in an ideal world, we would want to have all the active BPs be custodian on the Ethereum side, but the work only happens when you need to swap oracles, right? So presumably, once we go to mainnet, the BPs will basically submit a transaction to the Ethereum to nominate you guys as oracles, right? And you're now oracles. And unless we want to make a switch to add remove oracles, the custodians really don't have any work, right? They don't have to do anything because all the work is done by oracles. So
there may be a bigger technical conversation. I know early on there was talk about trying to keep the list of active BPs in sync somehow over there. I think you have to do something of that. Is that in is that still conceptual, or do y'all have something in place y'all are working on? Like I say, it may be a totally separate conversation, but that's a big burden for a small piece, ironically, you know?
Yeah, that is one of the things that I do want to discuss is how often do we want to be doing that, right? It doesn't have to match one-to-one, right? Because there's no actual requirement that the active BPs are at the same time setting the custodians on the Ethereum side. It's just that you don't want to get too much out of sync, because if you start, let's say BPs just leave the FIO chain, right, and they start dropping, and now you've dropped too many of them and they are still custodians on Ethereum, then you're now screwed, because you want to change your oracles on the Ethereum side, and now you got to go and find BPs that are no longer BPs at all, right? So that's kind of the concern. But other than that, there is no requirement that they're the top 21 active. I mean, if you were 23, you can still be a custodian on Ethereum, and that's totally fine, especially if you're accessible and can respond to a call to swap an oracle. So that's something I do want to discuss maybe on our BP call, is kind of how do we tackle that? How big of a burden is it? How often do we do it? Maybe we create a smaller set than the 21 on the Ethereum side. I don't know, but that's all
Exactly.
open for
And
discussion.
like, I don't have the magic answer. I would say it might be helpful to have, exactly kind of what you're saying. And maybe they'll watch this video and get a heads up on it. But before that call, be thinking about it. And you know what I mean? Is that I know Yates was involved on a call, and a couple of us that, are aware of, damn, that's actually a pretty technical, hurdle. But as opposed to just trying to on the fly come up with something and, on the BP call, or if that's just whenever you get the conversation started. But it may be something you could, provide just as a chat in the channel and general discussion, as opposed to trying to wrap it into the hour of the 15 people that we could get for the BP call. Give or take.
Sure. Yeah, that's
Makes
a
sense.
good
Your choice.
idea.
I just, because you're going to need some noodles thinking. And I mean, I'm curious, what is, like Yates or Joseph or CC or Aaron or any of those, I mean, get their noodles thinking.
Yeah, that's definitely something worth conversing. My kind of thinking was that we just try to do this manually at some interval.
Oh,
And that
absolutely.
interval could be
Absolutely.
like
Hey, bubblegum and
once a
toothpicks,
month,
baby.
right?
Bubblegum and toothpicks. We just deal with it and get it going. I mean, that's all we need. But
Right.
in thinking going forward, yeah. Absolutely.
So it could be like, hey, as a BP, once a month you should go to this Ethereum contract and sync it with the active block producers, right? That shouldn't be too big of an overhead, I would think. But again, that's where I kind of want to have that conversation with all the BPs and see what everybody thinks. But yeah, that's a good point. We probably should put together some kind of documentation on all of this. I know we have a lot of kind of specific documentation, but maybe we should put together some
Well, that
kind
one,
of higher
that
level.
one you might benefit from, a lot of outside the box thinking of, damn, you really don't want to have to sync them all the time or once a month or pick a select few. But as opposed to 3 a.m. in Australia time being like, hey, Ross, how do you think we should fix this?
Sure.
But
That's a
anyway,
good
yeah,
feedback.
sounds good. And totally cool with just let's get her going and try it out.
All right. Cool. Anything else?
Guess that's it.
Well, thanks so much for stepping up and let's stay in touch in the Telegram channel.
I'll
All
be
right.
around.
Okay,
Thanks, folks.
See you guys.
Bye.